The fluorescent light above the notary's desk had been flickering for 20 minutes. Nobody fixed it. It just kept blinking, on and off, like it couldn't decide whether to stay or go. Sara Hale understood exactly how it felt. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her fingers laced together so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. The room smelled of old carpet and cheap coffee and something final. Outside the narrow window, Chicago moved the way it always did, fast and indifferent, taxis and wind and people going somewhere important, nobody looking up. Her husband, soon to be her former husband, sat across the table, Daniel Hale, 34 years old, regional sales director, new haircut. He was already looking at his phone. There are 3 pages, the notary said, initials at the bottom of each, signature on the last. Daniel signed without reading. He had already read everything. His lawyer had made sure of that. He slid the papers across the table and glanced at Sara the way you glance at a traffic light. Functional, necessary. Briefly. "I have a call at 3, he said to no one in particular. Sara picked up the pen. It was a cheap ballpoint with the notary's office name printed along the side. She thought, briefly, about the pen Daniel had used at their wedding, his grandmother's fountain pen, gold nib. He had cried when he signed the marriage certificate. She remembered thinking she had never loved him more than in that moment. She signed. The notary gathered the papers. Daniel stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, "Take care of yourself, Sara." He said it the way people say it when they mean nothing, when it is simply the shape their mouth makes on the way out the door. He left without looking back. Sara stayed seated for another 2 minutes. The light kept flickering. She counted the blinks the way she used to count her breaths when anxiety crept in during the bad years. 7 blinks. 12. 20. Then she stood, pulled her coat from the back of the chair, and walked out into the November cold. The wind off Lake Michigan hit her like an open hand. She stopped on the sidewalk and pressed her palm flat against her stomach. 4 months along. Not showing yet, not obviously, but she felt it every morning and every night and every quiet moment in between. A small, steady presence that was entirely hers now. Daniel didn't know. She had planned to tell him. She had rehearsed the words 100 times. But somewhere between deciding and saying, she had watched him come home late 3 nights in a row smelling of a perfume she didn't own. And she had understood, slowly and then all at once, that the version of the future she had been planning no longer existed. She hadn't told him about the baby. She had told her lawyer instead. And her lawyer had told her to get out clean, with her name intact, before anything complicated the picture. So she had. A cab honked 2 blocks away. Sara started walking. Her apartment, her name only, now, was 40 minutes away by train. She had exactly $63 in her checking account. Her freelance graphic design work had dried up the past month when she stopped being able to concentrate, and Daniel had handled most of their bills out of a joint account she no longer had access to. She stopped at a crosswalk and watched the light. Red, then green. She crossed. "Sara?" She turned. A photographer she vaguely recognized from the local society pages was standing near the corner with a lens aimed at something behind her. He lowered the camera when he realized she had seen him. "Is it true," he called out, "that Daniel's already seeing Cassandra Webb?" Cassandra Webb, the interior designer, the one with the studio on Michigan Avenue and the feature in Architectural Digest, of course. Sara looked at him for one long moment. "No comment," she said, and she kept walking. She didn't cry until she was on the train, and even then it was quiet. No sound. Just tears moving down her face in the dark of the window's reflection. The city sliding past behind her like scenery from someone else's life. She pressed her hand to her stomach again. "We're okay," she whispered. "I promise you, we are going to be okay." She wasn't sure she believed it yet. But she said it anyway, because some promises you make before you know how to keep them, and you figure out the rest on the way. The first week alone was the hardest. Not because of the silence, though the silence was enormous. Not because of the empty side of the closet or the shelf where his coffee mug used to sit. It was harder than that. It was the weight of knowing that everything she had built for 4 years, every compromise, every quiet dinner, every morning she had talked herself into staying, had been returned to zero. She moved through her days on instinct. She ate toast. She drank water. She kept her prenatal appointments and sat in waiting rooms surrounded by women with partners who held their hands, and she looked at her own hands in her lap and thought, "This is fine. This is enough." Her sister Priya called every night. Priya lived in Boston and had strong opinions about Daniel Hale, most of which she had kept to herself for the duration of the marriage, and was now, delivering in installments. He didn't deserve you for one single day, Priya said on the fourth night. I said it at your rehearsal dinner, and I said nothing, and I have never forgiven myself. You didn't say it at the rehearsal dinner. I said it in my head, very loudly. Sara laughed, which surprised her. It was the first time she had laughed in days, and it felt strange, like a muscle she had forgotten she had. I need work, Sara said. Real work. I've been coasting on small clients, and I need something stable. Then find something stable. That's helpful advice, thank you. Sara, Priya's voice softened. You are the most talented visual designer I have ever seen, and I am not saying that because you are my sister. You built an entire brand identity for that hotel chain in your spare time, while working full-time and raising a marriage single-handedly. You can do this. Sara looked at the ceiling. The apartment was small and the walls were thin, and she could hear her neighbor's television through the drywall. I'm 4 months pregnant, she said, and completely alone. You are not completely alone, you have me. You're in Boston. I will get on a train. I don't need you to get on a train. I need you to let me feel sorry for myself for 5 more minutes and then tell me it. It's going to be fine. A pause, then 5 minutes, go ahead. She took the 5 minutes, and then Priya said it was going to be fine, and Sara chose, deliberately and carefully, to believe her. She rebuilt her client list one call at a time. She updated her portfolio. She reached out to old contacts. She took a small branding project for a restaurant group and turned in work so clean and sharp that they referred her to their sister company before the invoice had even cleared. She was going to be okay, slowly, undramatically, one invoice at a time. What she did not expect was James Calloway. It happened on Tuesday, 6 weeks after the divorce. Sara was at the public library on Michigan Avenue, working at one of the long wooden tables near the windows, because her apartment felt too small and too quiet, and she did better when there were people nearby, even strangers. She had her laptop open and her headphones in and a cup of tea going cold beside her keyboard. She didn't notice him sit down at the far end of her table until he spoke. Excuse me, he said, is this seat taken? She pulled out one earbud. He was pointing to the chair directly across from her. Not the one at the far end, the one right across. The table had 8 empty seats. She looked at the empty seats, and then she looked at him. He was somewhere in his early 40s, dark coat, no tie. He had the look of someone who had been very tired for a long time, and had made peace with it. He was carrying a notebook, a real paper one, and a paperback with a broken spine. It's a library, she said. Sit wherever you want. He sat down. He opened his notebook. He did not bother her again. She put her earbud back in. For the next hour, they worked in complete silence on opposite sides of the table. Sara finished her mock-ups and sent them off and leaned back in her chair, pressing her palms against her lower back where the ache had started. He glanced up. A long day, long month. He nodded like that was a complete and sufficient answer. Do you want tea? I'm going to the cart downstairs. She blinked. I don't know you. James Calloway, he said, extending a hand briefly. Architect, not a murderer. She looked at him for a moment. Chamomile, she said, if they have it. He came back with chamomile for her and black coffee for himself and set them down without ceremony. They worked for another hour in companionable quiet. When Sara's laptop battery hit 15% and she started packing up, he glanced over. Same time Thursday? He asked. She didn't know why she said yes. She said yes anyway. Thursday happened, and the Thursday after that. In a matter of 3 weeks, they had an unspoken arrangement. The corner of the 3rd floor, the long wooden table by the windows, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. He brought the tea. She stopped being surprised by it. He asked careful questions and listened to the answers. He talked about his work, in the way people talk about things they actually love. He had a dry, quiet humor that appeared unexpectedly and disappeared just as fast. He did not press for personal history. She told him about the divorce on the 5th Thursday. Not all of it, just the outline. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I lost my for 4 years ago, not divorce, she was sick. He looked at his coffee. For a long time after, I thought I'd just work until the quiet stopped feeling so loud. Did it? He considered that honestly. It got different. I'm not sure it got quiet. She told him about the baby 2 weeks later, watching his face carefully. He didn't flinch or shift or look away. How are you managing? He asked. Some days better than others. Is there anything you need? Practically speaking. She almost laughed. A better client list and approximately 1 good night of sleep. He smiled. It changed his whole face. I might be able to help with the first one. He slid a card across the table. My firm is rebranding. We've been looking for a designer who understands architectural language. The last two proposals we got looked like tech startup logos. She looked at the card. Callaway plus Reed Architecture. The address was on Wacker Drive. I'm not looking for charity, she said. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a paid contract for real work. He paused. The other three firms I've met with all had slicker websites and worse instincts. You've shown me your portfolio. You see space the way architects see space. I want that. She took the card. The contract came through the following week. It was more money than she had made in the past 3 months combined. She sat at her kitchen table and stared at the number on the proposal and pressed both hands flat on the table to feel something solid. She called Priya. I told you, Priya said immediately. You did not predict this exact scenario. I predicted the general shape of it. That counts. Sara looked around her small apartment. The late afternoon light was coming through the window the way it does in November in Chicago, low and golden and sideways, catching the dust on the windowsill and making it look like something beautiful. I think things might actually be okay, Sara said. Things are going to be more than okay, Priya said. Now go do the work. She went and did the work. The branding project for Callaway plus Reed took 6 weeks, and Sara gave it everything she had. She redesigned their visual identity from the ground up, clean, structural, honest. The kind of design that felt inevitable, like it had always been there waiting to be found. James reviewed her mock-ups in their Thursday sessions with the careful attention he gave, everything, asking precise questions, pushing back on 2 decisions that she then reconsidered and improved. It was the best professional collaboration she had experienced in years. She was 7 months pregnant now, visibly so, and James never made it strange. He adjusted the meeting times when she mentioned the commute was getting harder. He sent lunch when she worked late at the firm. He didn't announce these things, they simply appeared. She was careful with herself. She had made rules, clear ones, internal ones. She was not going to mistake kindness for something it wasn't. She was not going to let gratitude bend into something complicated. She had a baby coming and a career to rebuild, and she did not have the bandwidth for confusion. But some nights, walking home from the library, she would catch herself thinking about the way James listened. The full, complete attention of it, how rare that was, how she had forgotten it was possible. She filed those thoughts away and went home and worked. It was on a cold December afternoon, 3 weeks before her due date, that the letter arrived. It came in a thick cream envelope with a law firm return address she didn't recognize. She opened it standing at her kitchen counter and read it twice before the words fully landed. Daniel Hale was filing for parental rights. His lawyers had become aware of the pregnancy through social media. A photo Priya had posted at Sara's baby shower, tagged with her location. The letter was formal and measured and used phrases like biological entitlement and involvement in the child's upbringing, and it made Sara's hands shake. She called Priya first. He didn't want to know, Sara said, her voice thin. He signed the papers and walked out. He has never once reached out. Not once. I know, Priya said, and her voice was different now. No warmth, just steel. I'm getting on a train. Priya, I'm already packing. She called her lawyer next. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Denise Clark, who had handled the divorce with quiet precision, listened to everything and then said, he has no legal grounds for custody unless he can prove deliberate concealment with intent to deny rights. Since you didn't know about the pregnancy when the divorce was finalized, that claim falls apart. But we need to be ready. He has money and he has incentive. What incentive? His girlfriend, Ms. Webb, is apparently very publicly interested in marriage and family. This looks better for him if he plays devoted father. It's a narrative move, Sara, not a legal one. Sara sat down on her kitchen floor. She didn't intend to sit on the floor. She just found herself there. He's using my baby as a press strategy, she said. That's my read, Denise said. But the court won't care about his strategy. They'll care about your facts, and your facts are good. Priya arrived that evening. She took one look at Sara, sitting on the kitchen floor with her coat still on, and the letter in her hand, and she sat down on the floor beside her. Without saying a word, they sat there together for a while in the cold kitchen light. I am going to be with you every step of this, Priya said, and then we are going to take him apart, professionally and legally, and you are going to be fine. Sara leaned her head against her sister's shoulder. I'm so tired of having to be fine, she said. I know. Priya put her arm around her. Be tired for tonight. We start fighting tomorrow. She did not tell James about the custody letter for a week. When she did, they were in his firm's conference room, reviewing the final brand guidelines. And she mentioned it the way she mentioned practical things, flatly, factually, watching his face. His expression didn't change. But he closed his notebook. He abandoned the pregnancy and is now filing for rights because it's convenient for his image, James said. That's the summary, yes. What do you need? I need a very good lawyer and to not fall apart before the baby comes. You have Denise Clark? She blinked. You know her? I know her reputation. She's the best family lawyer in Chicago. You're in good hands. He paused. And you won't fall apart. You haven't once. Through any of this. You don't know all of it. I know enough, he said it simply. Not as a comfort, as a fact. That night she walked home through the first snow of the season. Chicago in early winter has a particular quality. The cold is serious, but the snow softens everything, quiets the city into something almost gentle. She walked slowly, her coat open at the front because nothing buttoned over her anymore. And she thought about the shape her life had taken, how different it looked from what she had imagined a year ago, how much of it had been taken and how much she had built back up with her own hands. She thought about James. She thought about the rules she had made for herself and how much quieter they had gotten lately. She filed those thoughts away again. But this time they didn't stay as neatly. 3 days later, her phone rang at 2:19 in the morning. She answered it on the second ring, already sitting up, already knowing. I think it's time, she said to the empty room. She called Priya, who was already at a hotel 6 blocks away and arrived in 11 minutes. She called Denise, who she didn't need but called anyway because Denise had told her to call. She got her bag. She put her coat on. She was methodical, focused, breathing through it. In the lobby of her building, waiting for Priya's cab, her phone buzzed with a text. It was James. The timestamp said 2:31 a.m. Priya called me. I'm outside. She walked out the front door and he was there, his car at the curb, the engine running, his breath visible in the cold air. He had a thermos in his hand. His coat was on wrong, one collar turned in, and she could tell he had dressed in about 45 seconds. You didn't have to, she started. I know, he said. Get in. She got in. He drove to Northwestern Memorial, calm and steady, and when Priya's cab pulled up behind them, he handed off the thermos to her sister and said, Chamomile. She hasn't had anything since yesterday afternoon. Priya looked at him. Then she looked at Sara. Then she looked at him again. Thank you, she said, with the precise tone of someone filing information for future reference. The next 7 hours were long and difficult, and then, at 9:44 in the morning, they were the best hours of Sara's life. A girl. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair already, impossibly. 10 fingers, 10 toes. A sound like a question. Sara held her and didn't speak for a long time. Hi, she finally whispered. Hi, my love. I have been waiting for you. James was in the waiting room when Priya went out to update him. Sara found out later that he had stayed the entire time. He hadn't left to work, hadn't checked out, had just sat there in the waiting room, reading his notebook, until there was news. When they brought the baby home 3 days later, there was a bag of groceries outside Sarah's apartment door. No note, just food, the kind she actually ate, chamomile, tea and fruit, and 3 containers of the soup from the restaurant a block away that she had once mentioned was her favorite. She stood in the hallway, holding her daughter and looking at the groceries. His name is James, she told her daughter, who was asleep and unconcerned, and I think I'm in a great deal of trouble. The first custody hearing was in February. Sara arrived with Priya beside her and Denise ahead of her and her daughter at home, with a neighbor she trusted. She wore a dark coat and her good shoes, and she sat very straight. Daniel arrived with 2 lawyers and Cassandra Webb, who was dressed as if for a magazine shoot in something cream-colored that probably cost more than Sara's rent. Daniel looked composed and practiced. He had the expression of a man who had been media-trained recently. When Sara took the stand, Daniel's lawyer questioned her for 40 minutes. He used words like impulsive concealment and pattern of isolation. He suggested she had deliberately kept Daniel from his parental rights out of spite and personal vendetta. He made her sound small and vindictive and unstable. Sara answered every question without raising her voice. When Denise stood up, she was very brief. She submitted Daniel's phone records, which showed 0 contact with Sara in the 4 months following the divorce. She submitted his travel records, which showed he had been in Aspen with Cassandra Webb during the week Sara's doctors had first confirmed the pregnancy. She submitted a voicemail, played in full in the quiet courtroom, of Daniel speaking to a colleague 2 months after the divorce. The whole thing is done. Clean break. No complications. Denise let it play twice. Then she called a witness, Daniel's own assistant, who had worked for him for 3 years, and who testified calmly and carefully that Daniel had told her he knew about Sara's pregnancy and had chosen not to engage. The assistant had saved the email. Denise had the email. The courtroom was very still. Daniel's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Sara was asked to speak. She stood and looked at the judge and said the words she had been carrying for months. He made his choice when it mattered. He chose to walk away from me, and he chose to walk away from her before she was born. He doesn't want to be her father. He wants to be seen as one. Those are not the same thing. The judge looked at her over his glasses for a long moment. The ruling came down the same afternoon. Primary custody awarded to Sara Hale. Supervised visitation subject to Daniel's written application, pending review of further conduct. The judge's language was pointed in a way that made Daniel's lawyers go very quiet. Outside the courthouse, cameras were waiting. Someone had tipped them off. Cassandra, probably, in the hope that the story would run differently. A reporter called out, "Sara, do you have anything to say to your ex-husband?" Sara looked at the camera. "I hope he figures out what actually matters," she said, "for his own sake." She walked to the car where Priya was waiting. Priya opened the door without a word, and they drove home, and Sara didn't say anything for the first 15 minutes. Then she turned to her sister. "I want to hold my daughter," she said. "I know," Priya said. "We're almost there." Spring came early that year, the way it does sometimes in Chicago, catching everyone off guard. The lake turned from iron gray to something softer almost overnight, and the city exhaled, and Sara felt it like a loosening in her own chest. Her daughter was 3 months old. Her name was Nina. She had Sara's dark eyes and a very serious expression, and a laugh that arrived without warning, and lit up whatever room it was in. Sara was exhausted in the bone-deep way that new mothers are exhausted, and also happier than she had been in years. The work was going well. The Callaway Plus Reed rebrand had led to 2 referrals, and she had rebuilt her client list from the ground up with work she was actually proud of. She had moved to a better apartment, a 2-bedroom, 3rd floor, with a window in the kitchen that got morning light. She and James had dinner for the first time on a Thursday in April, not a library Thursday. An actual dinner at a restaurant, intentional. He had asked carefully, clearly, without pressure, and she had said yes with the same care. They talked for 3 hours. They talked about architecture and design, and the way Chicago looks from the water at certain times of year. They talked about grief, which was easier than Sara expected, because James talked about his late wife, the way people talk about someone they carry with them, not someone they're hiding. He talked about the 4 years of silence after, and what it had cost him, and what he had eventually decided to do with it. He asked about Nina. His face when he talked about Nina was the face of someone trying to be careful not to want something too much. After dinner they walked along the lakefront. The city was very beautiful and very quiet, and Sara thought about all the rules she had made and how most of them had been made in fear, and how fear was not the same as wisdom. She told him about the rules on the walk back. "I made them because I didn't trust my own judgment," she said. After 4 years of being wrong about someone, he was quiet. "That makes sense. The problem," she said, "is that I think my judgment might actually be working correctly this time, which is terrifying." He stopped walking. She stopped too. The lake was dark and moving behind him. "I'm not going to rush anything," he said. "I don't have anywhere to be." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. It wasn't a beginning. It was more like an agreement. An agreement, to be honest, to go slowly, to build something worth having rather than something easy. She had had easy. Easy had cost her everything. This time she wanted something real. By summer, the city knew who she was. Not because she had sought it, because a journalist from the Tribune had written a piece on the custody case, framing it as a story about a woman who had been dismissed and who had refused to stay dismissed. The piece ran on a Sunday morning, and by Monday evening it had been shared thousands of times. The comments, most of them, were generous. Women writing about their own versions of the same story. Men writing that they had not understood until they read it. Daniel's PR team released a statement that confirmed, in the careful way of all damage control, exactly what the article had implied. Cassandra Webb gave an interview in which she said very little of substance with great elegance. Sara did not respond to any of it. She was at her kitchen table with Nina in a bouncer beside her, working on a new branding proposal, when her phone filled with messages. Priya called from Boston, laughing with pure joy. James texted a single line, "Front page, you deserve it." She put the phone down and looked at her daughter, who was watching the light move across the ceiling with the complete focus of a person who has not yet learned that most things aren't worth paying attention to. "We're okay," Sara told her, the same words as that first night, but different now. Not a hope, a fact. 2 weeks later, an invitation arrived. A charity event at the Art Institute, a fundraiser for a mentorship program for young women in design and architecture. The organizer, a woman named Claire Ford, who ran one of Chicago's oldest foundations, had included a handwritten note. "We've heard about your work. We'd love for you to come. We think you have something to say." Sara hesitated. She had spent months being looked at by people who wanted to find the scandal in her. Walking into a room full of Chicago's design and architecture world felt like inviting it again. She called James. "Come with me," she said. He came with her. The evening was elegant and warm, held in the modern wing of the Art Institute, with the city visible through the floor to ceiling. Windows, lit up and enormous. Sara wore a deep blue dress that Nina had already tried to drool on twice, and James wore a suit without an apron, which felt like an occasion. The room was full of people who knew James, and through him people met Sara. She talked about her work. She talked about design as a language, about how spaces communicate dignity or its absence, about what it means to build something that lasts. She talked about it the way she talked about it when she loved it, which was fully and without armor. A woman from an architecture firm in the West Loop shook her hand at the end of a conversation and said, "I want you on a project. Seriously. Call my office Monday." Claire Ford found her near the windows at the end of the evening. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and the manner of someone who had stopped performing calm and simply arrived at it. "You have the kind of authority that's very hard to teach," Claire said. "The kind that comes from surviving something and not letting it make you small." "It tried," Sara said. "They always do," Claire said. "The important thing is, you're still the size you were meant to be." On the way out, Cassandra Webb arrived late, arm in arm with a man who was not Daniel. She was still beautiful. She glanced at Sara and then glanced at James, and something moved across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or the arithmetic of someone assessing what they'd won and what they'd lost. Sara met her eyes, not with heat, just with steadiness. Cassandra looked away first. Outside, the city was warm and loud and full of summer. James put his jacket over her shoulders, and they walked down Michigan Avenue, and neither of them said anything for a while, and it was the right kind of silence. "You were remarkable tonight," he said. "I was just talking about work." "I know," he said. "That's what made it remarkable." The day Daniel's formal apology was published. Not in court, but voluntarily, in a piece he submitted to the Tribune under his own name, Sara was at the park with Nina. Nina was 7 months old. She could sit up on her own now, and she had opinions about grass, which turned out to be mixed. She would reach out and touch it very seriously, and then look up at Sara as if reporting findings. Sara read the piece on her phone while Nina considered a blade of grass. Daniel wrote about what he had done with the particular honesty of someone who has had everything stripped away and found it clarifying. He wrote about the choices he had made and what they had cost, not just legally or professionally, but in the deeper register where things actually matter. He wrote that Sara had acted with more integrity in the worst year of her life than he had, managed in the best years of his. It was not a short piece. He had clearly worked on it. Sara read it twice. She felt nothing as clean as satisfaction. What she felt was something quieter. Not forgiveness exactly, but the release of something that had been held too long. She set the phone down and watched her daughter touch the grass again, report her findings. "Look up. Your father is trying," Sara said. "I don't know if he'll succeed, but he is trying." Nina looked at her with those dark, serious eyes. "You'll decide what to do with that someday," Sara said. "When you're ready, that will be your story to tell." She put the phone away. She took Nina's small hand and held it for a moment. Tiny fingers wrapped around one of hers. The park was full of afternoon light and the sound of other children and the smell of fresh-cut grass. She sat there a long time. September in Chicago carries the last of summer and the first of fall in the same breath. The light goes golden and sideways, and the lake is still warm, but the mornings have bite to them, the kind of mornings that remind you things are changing. James proposed on a Tuesday afternoon at the library, not at a restaurant, not at some architectural landmark, at the long wooden table by the windows on the 3rd floor where they had met, with the city below them and the ordinary library quiet around them, and a cup of chamomile going cold beside Sara's keyboard. He put a small box on the table between them without ceremony. "I want to be honest with you," he said. "I've been thinking about how to do this for 2 months. and I kept coming up with things that felt like performances. And you have never once needed a performance from me, so. She looked at the box. Then she looked at him. I love you, he said. I love Nina. I love that you make everything you do look inevitable, even when I know how hard you're working. I would like, if you're willing, to build something with you. Not because you need saving. You have made it very clear you don't need saving. But because I think we are better together than we are apart, and I think we both know it. Sara was quiet for a long moment. I made a lot of rules, she said. I know. Most of them were about not doing exactly this. I know that too. She opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, clean, architectural. Exactly the kind of design she would have chosen herself. She looked at it for a while. Yes, she said. But only if you know that I'm not easy. I am stubborn and I have opinions about design that I will defend past the point of reasonableness, and I have a 7-month-old who will absolutely test everything you think you know about patience. I'm aware of all three, he said. I'm asking anyway. She looked at him. He was steady in the way that she had come to understand, was not a mask but a fact, the kind of steadiness that had come through loss and work and choosing every day to show up. Okay, she said. Yes. He put the ring on her finger at the wooden library table on a Tuesday afternoon, and a woman 2 tables over, who had clearly been listening, looked up and smiled, and then very politely looked back at her book. They married in October in James's firm's courtyard, which he had redesigned years ago and loved for the way light moved through it in the afternoon. Small wedding. Priya, Denise. A handful of people from work. Nina in a white dress that she objected to strongly and then fell asleep in halfway through the ceremony. Claire Ford came. She brought a gift and said nothing sentimental, which was the best gift she could have given. When the officiant asked James to say his vows, he said, I have known you through the hardest year of your life and watched you build something extraordinary from it. I want to be there for whatever comes next, not as a rescue, as a witness. When Sara said hers, she kept them short. You showed me what it looks like when someone actually means what they say. I didn't know how rare that was until I found it. I'm not letting it go. After the ceremony, when the guests were eating and the courtyard was full of low autumn light, Sara stood by the old brick wall at the edge of the garden with Nina asleep against her shoulder. The city moved beyond the walls, indifferent and enormous, the same city that had seen her sign the divorce papers and walk out into the cold with $63 and a secret and nothing else. She looked at it now and felt no bitterness. Only something clear and clean, like a room after the windows have been opened. We made it, she whispered to her daughter. We actually made it. Priya appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne, one of which she immediately replaced with ginger ale when she remembered. I called it, Priya said. You called the general shape of it. It counts. Priya raised her glass to you, to Nina, to proving that the worst year of your life can still be the beginning of the best one. Sara raised her glass, and to not making the same mistakes twice. And to that, Priya agreed. They drank. Inside, James was holding Nina, who had woken up and was conducting a very serious investigation of his collar. He caught Sara's eye across the courtyard and smiled the slow smile that still surprised her, even now. She smiled back. The city glittered beyond the walls. The year had been enormous. The grief had been real. The fear had been real. The loneliness had been real. None of it was pretend and none of it was small. But here, on the other side of it, with her daughter against her husband's chest and her sister beside her, and the autumn light going gold across the old brick, Sara understood something she hadn't had the words for when it was happening. She had not survived the year in spite of what she lost. She had found her life because of what she chose to do after. That was the whole story. That was all of it. Years later, Nina would ask her mother about that year, about the divorce and the cold and the library, and how she had managed. Sara would think about it carefully, the way she thought about things that mattered, before she answered. I stopped waiting for someone to make it okay, she would say. I decided I was going to make it okay myself. And then things got okay, and then they got better, and then they got like this. She would gesture at the kitchen, the apartment, the ordinary Wednesday morning with coffee on the stove, and James reading at the table, and the city outside living its enormous, indifferent life. Nina would look at all of it, and then she would look at her mother. Was it worth it? She would ask. Going through all of that? Sara would take a moment with the question, the way she always did. Every single bit, she would say, and Nina would nod, slowly, the way she had nodded as a baby in the park examining grass, filing findings, deciding what to believe, and that would be enough.